Alrighty, hello and welcome to yet another Synch Strike Shadow Cascade build. But I promise this one's at least a little bit different. I actually made this one as the first one I made for the patch, but I expected it to be nerfed, and so I didn't bother to make the build. I wanted to wait for the nerf to happen, but we are at least through all of the patches that are going to happen before Christmas, and it's not nerfed at all. So I'm not sure why, but we might as well go ahead and put the build out. As a lot of you probably already know, the Synch Strike Shadow Cascade interaction is extremely strong, like broken strong right now. So bear that in mind if you don't want to play something that is considered by many in the community to be broken. This one is going to be in that realm. But I don't believe the nerfs that will eventually happen will kill this build. In fact, I think this version of the build is a little bit more safe than some of the others, depending on how they decide to nerf it. We'll go into that when we talk about future patch considerations. But all right, let's get into the build. It's very strong. It's an exceptionally good clear speed build. That's one of its positives for sure. It is faster than the other ones that I've seen, which generally rely on double Synch Strike to proc Shadow Cascade. This one does Synch Strike to Shift, and it uses Smoke Weaver to increase Shift's cooldown speed, so that we can do it much faster than we otherwise would, making it, in my opinion, a superior mono clear build to the other one, although the other one has definitely has a higher top end damage potential than this one. So if you want faster mono clear speed, I think this is for you. If you're trying to get the absolute most damage out of that interaction between Synch Strike and Shadow Cascade, something along the lines of Boardman's build is probably going to be more up your alley. But it does do a whole lot of damage in a huge area. It is still one of the highest damage options in the game and one of the highest area options in the game, and so it's not like you're really compromising much as far as that goes. You are adding move slash clear speed while giving up some damage, but it's still going to be really high. The build is also relatively tanky. It as usual for Rogue, it relies a lot more on just not getting hit very often than it does actually taking damage, but it's got reasonable tankiness. It's not going to be squishy, especially if you get your resistances capped. It's going to be quite solid. Is it as good in arena as some of the other builds? You might be able to make it more that way, but this is definitely made more for damage clear speed. So think more monolith runs if you're going to go with this one. You can use it for arena, but I'm sure there are other content creators out there who have created builds that are much more designed for the arena. Okay, there's not really like a whole lot of like straight negatives other than those like sort of caveats. It's just an incredibly strong build right now that it's really hard not to do very, very well with it. So let's go ahead and jump into player skill level if you want to actually run this. So there are a couple of things to think about, primarily with gear. So it is using Smoke Weaver, which is farmable now. It was bugged before and wasn't, but is now. You do need it to maximize your clear speed potential since it affects the cooldown of your shift, but it is still a completely usable build without it. I started running it without Smoke Weaver and then transitioned once it became available. So you definitely don't need it. However, the idols that increase your damage per active shadow with Shadow Cascade are pretty important. So you're going to want those to really get a lot of damage out of this. You can still run it without, but I don't know just how strong it'll be, but I do remember going through the story without these and it being quite strong. So overall, it's not a high rotational build by any stretch. A beginner can definitely play this build to great success. And it just depends on how much you want to get that top end damage and whether or not you want Smoke Weaver, whether you decide to play it earlier or wait to farm some stuff. Okay, future patch considerations. This is a big part of this build because it needs to be nerfed. Any Synch Strike Shadow Cascade mechanic build right now needs a nerf. And there are different ideas of how it should be nerfed. My opinion is that the mana regen within Shadow Cascade's tree, which I'll show you later, is the most broken thing about it and should be the very first thing that changes. Some people think it's damage, some people think it's AoE. Regardless, it's going to get nerfed. It has to get nerfed at some point. The only question is when. Will it be sooner or later? And that is the risk you are taking by running these. But I do think this build is more set up to handle that nerf and still be strong, because it doesn't rely on the double Synch Strike interaction, which is more reliant on the mana generation in Shadow Cascade. This one still definitely takes advantage of it, but it is in a better place to overcome any nerf in that regard. And so I think it's a little bit more future-proof, but it will definitely be affected by it. And if they go damage and they go area instead of the mana, then who knows what happens with it. So just bear that in mind if you decide to play this build. It's super strong now, but it's definitely got to be on the list of things that need to be adjusted. Okay, with all those caveats out of the way, let's go into the actual build. How do you make it? We'll start with the skill trees. We'll also start with Flurry, which is the least used in this. Once you get going, you will use it more earlier on in the game. It is primarily a mana generator, but you can do some damage with it, and we've set this up to keep you out of harm's way for the most part. So the big areas that we're taking are some move speed, or not some move speed, excuse me, some attack speed stuff over here, Alacrity, Relentless a little bit, Adrenaline Rush, Inexhaustible, and Strained Reflexes all are for more attack speed so that you get your mana back quicker. So is Sap Willpower. We also have a little bit of, we need to take these, some Leech and some health gain in there. So they will help with that as well. But you really are using this as a filler at best. Most of the time you're going to try to use it not at all. But should you need to, we've also went down this way. We've taken some critical strike chance. But what we really wanted down here is Crescendo into Shockwave and then the Billowing Waves, which gives you farther range, much farther than you otherwise have, help you stay away from melee range from enemies when you are trying to regen your mana. Okay, next up, Shift. Shift plays a vital role in this build, and not just to move you around, not just to get you out of danger. So the first thing we need to do is go all the way over here and take Lasting Presence to create a shadow, and then Dancing Shadows to use Shadow Cascade after Shift. This will allow the shadows from both Shift and from Synch Strike to be used when you shift. So this is your Shadow Cascade proc ability. We're also getting that sweet movement speed from Momentum here. We're taking the iframe from Shadow Slip. And just in case we get our iframe timing wrong, we have Elusive to try to help us overcome any potential attack that slips through it. We've also taken Unseen Strike for a little bit of damage as we do it, and Shadow Recuperation for some healing, and one into Breathing Technique for the same reason. These are just like the last things you'll take. You need 2 here to go, but then these will be the last 2 points you'll take. Okay, Shadow Cascade. This has the single most important node in the entire build, in all of these builds currently, in my opinion. And it's the first thing you will take. You'll go down here and take this Mantle for the Armor Shred, which is really just a connecting node to get you to Onslaught, which refunds 25% of your mana if you have at least 1 shadow. Don't really care about that, honestly. What we really care about is Fight in the Shadows, where you gain mana on use with Shadow Cascade per active shadow, and it's 12 per shadow, and we should have 4 to 5 shadows up every time we use it at worst. And so this is what allows us to pretty much infinitely spam the Synch Strike into Shift rotation without ever, or almost ever, worrying about mana regeneration. It's why this is so powerful. Once we've taken that, we can then focus on damage. So we'll go take Crushing Darkness, 30% damage, no attack speed scaling. We don't care because we're never going to directly cast Shadow Cascade. It's always going to be procced by a shift or You could proc it via Synch Strike, but almost always via Shift. Flow state, more damage per sword and per dagger. We have one of each, so awesome. Rapid expanse for the best possible area. We've got Shadow Torrent, 12% damage per shadow. You can see why that's so good. And then leverage momentum, 1% damage per percent of increased melee attack speeds you have. That covers all of Shadow Cascade. Now, Synch Strike, the other really important part of this. We are going to focus mostly on, well, we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to take the Armor Shred down here. We're going to take Shadow Dagger on hit. We don't care too much about that. We're going to take Shadow Infusion and Wave of Darkness so we can do shadows via Cascade. Honestly, I'd probably take this stuff last. It's not the most important stuff in here. The biggest thing out of Synch Strike as far as what it does for you is foreshadowing. 200% increased damage within 4 seconds of using Synch Strike for your shadows. Now that's your shadows do 200% increased damage, so it applies to your Shadow Cascade. That's pretty strong. We're also taking 404 and Razor Strike so we can do some physical resistance shred in the front end before we proc our Shadow Cascade. Last ability is Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb has a couple of applications in here. First, it can create more shadows, so it's just another source of shadows to proc Shadow Cascade. Should you wish to have that, really useful kind of when you're just doing other things. So like when you're fighting a boss trying to do all your normal Synch Strike shift, you can pop down a Smoke Bomb and get some more shadows on the way. Also Smoke Blades, where we're granted Smoke Blades each second for 4 seconds while inside the Smoke Bomb, granting us increased melee and throwing damage. So hey, there's some more melee damage for Shadow Cascade. And then we're also going to go over here, we're going to get Generosity for a bigger area. Enfeeblement for 1 stack of Frailty, which is just going to get us down to Moonlight Bomb. It's a source of Silver Shroud. Silver Shroud is really strong with that guaranteed dodge on the next hit, and then in this case 300 ward afterwards. That is all the skills and specs, so let's move on to the passive tree. We're going to start with one of my favorite nodes in the Rogue base class, which is Swift Assassin for the attack speed and the physical damage. Remember, we get increased damage, or more damage, excuse me, for increased attack speed, so that's good. Then we're going to make sure we take Twin Blade at 5 points for the ability to dual wield. We're going to take 1 in Guile to get to 5 in Evasion. That damage taken while moving is excellent, but the increased dodge rating is nice as well. And Agility for more movement speed and increased damage for movement speed, so that works together really nicely. We are going to take 5 and 5 in Sapping Strikes in case we need to flurry mana regen. And this I've actually started taking recently, so this is later in the build. The dodge rating and Glancing Blow is always nice. Next up is Blade Dancer, and everything from this point on goes into Blade Dancer. 8 of 8 in Cloak of Shadows. 5 of 8 currently, and probably for a while in Pursuit. That movement speed's really nice. 6 of 6 in Synthesis for the health gain on shadows, but more importantly, the increased shadow damage. 8 of 8 in Once for the base damage. Also, that is a lot of dodge rating of hit recently, so if we get hit, it will further help us to not get hit more. This is really an overlapping help on top of Silver Shroud, which should be doing most of the work. But in case you get laser, this is another extra effect, or in case your Silver Shrouds are on cooldown. By the way, Veil of Night is something I took before and have removed because it just procs so slowly, so rarely in this build that I didn't see it as very valuable. You can take it if you want to, but bear in mind we just don't attack super quickly, and so this doesn't have the same value as it does in some other builds. Okay, we're gonna take 6 of 6 in Avicen's Pact, Ascivin's Pact. The dodge rating, increased damage while at full health. I would wait to take this though, because the thing you really want to get to is first Flash of Steel, and then Weapons of Choice, where you're going to get 150% crit multi with a sword and a dagger. We're also going to take 10 and 10 Argent Veil. This is another one of those, hey, you got hit, Silver Shroud to keep you alive type of things that Marksman also has. This one, if you drop below half health, then you get the Silver Shroud guaranteed dodge and 1,000 ward, which is great. The other thing we're going to take, or the last thing we're going to take in here, is Shadow Master. Increased shadow damage for 100% and a maximum shadow to add a cherry on top. So just an excellent node for this particular build. That covers the passive tree. Let's move on to itemization. All right, the build doesn't even require actually a unique, but it is smoother with Smoke Weaver. Smoke Weaver, you'll take a little bit of a damage reduction. It's not actually nearly as much as you would think. It's relatively low as far as on a per hit basis, but you will be able to shift significantly more quickly. I think it drops at what, we're at 2.3. I think it drops at 7/10 of a second, which when it's only a 3-second ability is good. That's really good. We can shift all the time, and since shift is proccing our Shadow Cascades, the more shifts the better. All right, the other thing that's important for the build is increased damage per active shadow with Shadow Cascade. The higher rolls, of course, the better. I've got some pretty good rolled ones here, so all these together, if you're putting out 5 shadows, that's a lot of increased damage. Also, if you can manage to get increased damage of attacks used by shadows on the bottom, that is incredible as far as damage goes. Ward gain when you create a shadow is also really good. If you manage to get either of those, that's great. Health gain on dodge and increased armor shred duration are okay too. There's a lot of good suffixes for this build, but definitely prioritize that prefix. All right, as far as other stats that you want in other gear, on your weapon, you're looking for base, crit, melee, fizz. That's the non-unique weapon. You can get frailty, excellent. I have stun chance on here as well. That's not bad. There are other things that can go in there. Chill is really good, for example. Option. Slow would also be okay because you're going to run around a lot and actually try not to get hit. So either one of those is really good. Frailty, of course, is solid too if you're not applying it consistently through your rotation. I also have increased damage for active shadow with Shadow Cascade on my helmet. That is excellent. I don't have it on my body armor yet, but that's not by design. It just hasn't happened yet. If you don't have it though, dodge and health, dexterity, vitality, that sort of stuff, really good. Of course, you're going to want your resistances when you can get them. This is a double +5. This is actually just a very nice item that I've got here. What is it? What's the tiers in this? 5, 5, 4. Oh, I've only got a 1 though on that that suffix. So I'd like to get that up higher. Here's more set stuff. Fizz pen on your amulet's great. And more dodge. The theme is pretty similar. Crit strike chance, if you've got room for it, go for it. Let's see, more crit strike here. Health, I've got some armor because there's no dodge. I can go on the relic. More set stuff. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Crit strike avoidance as you need it. And of course, movement speed on your boots every time. Pretty simple stuff. The rogue generally is pretty consistent with wanting, of course, your resistances, dodge, health if you can get it, crit avoidance. There's not a whole lot of thinking that has to go into making most of these rogue builds. They're pretty easy to do. Yeah, that covers the itemization. Pretty simple. Okay, last thing. Let's talk about the rotation. It's another easy rotation. What you're going to do, you're going to walk up to your enemies. You're going to Synch Strike at them, and then you are going to shift away. And by doing that, you're going to do a crap ton of damage to them. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. The other things you have to do, if you need mana, you can flurry. You can flurry from quite a ways away. You probably won't need it very often, but it's there. You can put decoy on your bar just to give you some room if there's too many enemies and you're worried about getting hit too hard. And you have smoke bomb also as an additional generator of your shadows, and also an additional generator of Silver Shroud. Another pretty simple rotation. You're going to spend most of your time Synch Strike, Shift, Synch Strike, Shift throughout the monos. Get to the Echo Boss, Shift, Strike, Sync. Or excuse me, wow, Synch Strike, Shift. That's hard to say. That is it. That's all you really need to do. Very, very simple play. Put down Smoke Bomb when you want to, or Decoy as needed, and Flurry to regen mana if you ever happen to run out. All right, that covers the build. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to watch me work on these builds and just run general LE stuff, I do stream about 6 days a week. Would love to have you there. Also, we have a Discord where we talk all things LE and even other games and some off-topic stuff. Would love to have you there as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great time in Last Epoch, and I hope you enjoy Rogue as much as I do.